Hi, welcome to the show. My name is Jessey Goldberg, and my guest today, believe it or not, is somebody named Jessey. So I have the first name as your last name.
Yep.
Please spell it J-E-S-S-Y.
E-Y.
You do?
J-E-S-S-E-Y.
Oh, you do. You're right.
I do.
Okay. Anyway, she's here because she's a what's the right word?
I'm a health plan consultant.
Health plan consultant.
Yeah.
And you see these commercials on TV for like Medicare and all this stuff, and you don't know what they're saying and is Medicare Advantage better than not Advantage. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about yourself first. Where are you from?
Well, I'm originally from Colorado, and I've been doing health plans for about 30 years. Do all kinds of health plans, anything from birth to death. I can make sure the person has something that's going to meet their needs.
Only health plans, no life insurance, all that kind of stuff?
I
Just
really
health.
don't delve into anything else. Just pretty much if it has to do with taking care of your health and making sure you can get appropriate care, that's my wheelhouse.
So where are you from originally?
Colorado.
No, what part of Colorado?
Evergreen.
Evergreen, Colorado. And
Yeah.
then, but you said to me before we started you moved 64 times?
I have.
See,
Yes.
that's a lot of times.
A lot of times. I've lived some interesting places.
How many times did you move before you were 18?
27.
27. Wow.
Yeah.
You got this down already.
Well, I sat down one time, somebody asked me, and I sat down and made a list, and yeah, moved 27 times by the time I finished high school, and then...
Did you ever live in Colorado as an adult?
Oh yeah, yeah, most of the time until I was about 35.
Really?
Yeah.
I lived in Aspen for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty fancy, huh? I was one of the
yeah.
hoity-toities, you know.
Well, I lived in Steamboat Springs and Craig and places on the western slope and mostly on the eastern slope of Colorado.
Yeah, Steamboat Springs is, my friend did the map there. You know those little maps they have?
Yeah. Yeah, where they put the little, like, the businesses and things on.
He did that map. He was the guy who did that.
Yeah.
He did really well. He did that one, he did Jackson Hole, and he did Aspen. And I was there when he started. I was there when he was doing the Steamboat Springs map, and he threw his pen against the wall, and the ink went all over everything, and he got really mad.
Oh, yeah. Big mess out of stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to the healthcare stuff. Start from the beginning. Do you want to talk about the regular health care, or do you want to do the Medicare first?
More people right now are kind of interested in Medicare, so maybe I'll start with that, and then we'll backtrack and talk about what people under 65 do. But Medicare is generally people who are 65 and older, or people who are on disability. So, you know, if you get disability and you're 50 years old, you're going to end up on Medicare.
Is that SSI? Is that what that is?
Yeah, yeah. There's many different programs for people that are disabled, but ultimately a person who's been on disability for 2 years is going to be transferred to Medicare.
Okay, so start with, say you're 60, let's start with 60 people just turning 65.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can apply for Medicare before you're 65, like a month or something like that?
90 days before.
90 days before?
Yep.
And you get it the first of the month? Or
starts the first of the month that you were born in.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what are the choices? The first choice is just Medicare, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, the first thing people run into is a lot of people turning 65 are still working. So their first question is, should I be on my company plan, or should I come off my company plan and go to Medicare? There's no easy answer to that. It just really depends on what that company plan is costing you. I meet people all the time. They come to me and they're 68 and they're finally ready to retire. And when they look at Medicare, they go, oh my gosh, why did I stay on my company's plan? All those years I threw away all that money.
Is there a difference between the access, the doctors that you get on a company plan as opposed to Medicare?
Yes.
I mean,
it can really depend on the type of Medicare plan you choose. So when you're on a company plan, nearly always it's going to be a PPO that says, here's your network, we use this particular company, and so you need to have doctors that take this plan. When you move to Medicare, there are two different ways to do it. You can choose a Medicare supplement, which doesn't have any networks at all. If you pay that monthly fee, and they're about $100 a month, then you're free from networks. You can see any doctor in the United States that takes Medicare patients.
But you say who takes Medicare patients, but that's a problem, isn't it? Some doctors don't take Medicare patients.
Well, it depends. Some doctors won't take certain Medicare plans, but most doctors will take Medicare, as long as they know that they're billing the federal government.
But don't they get a lot less money for taking Medicare?
Do.
I mean, what's an example of how much would be? Example of how much difference it would be?
It depends on the plan the person has. So
like you say, if you have a $50,000 operation and Medicare pays like $500, I mean, the doctor's going to say, "I'm not doing your operation."
They can. Some doctors do complain about the Medicare price, and I've heard of doctors that are seeing patients and they get $15 for a visit, you know. It's hardly worth their time. You can see why they don't want a lot of Medicare patients. Most of them, if they've already had that person as a patient, they'll keep them.
I've had an issue when people were saying, we have enough Medicare patients already, we're not taking any more.
Right. Yes,
So,
that happens.
right.
So there was a doctor that I wanted to see before I turned 65. I called that doctor's office, and I just wanted that person to be my primary care doctor. And I made an appointment to go in, and when I got there, she said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "Nothing, I don't need anything." And she said, "Then why did you come in?" And I said, "Because I wanted to be on your patient list before next month when I go to Medicare."
Oh, that worked?
Yeah, it worked. She laughed.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. But that way I was already a patient. But the waiting list to have her as a primary care doctor, if you're already on Medicare, was 2 years long.
Oh.
I just kind of...
Is there a list somewhere that says people who take Medicare and people don't take Medicare? Or?
Usually you have to ask the office. They don't publicize it, but you know, it'll say if they're accepting new patients. And if you call, a lot of times they'll say, well, you know, we've got a list for Medicare. We only take a certain percentage of Medicare patients. And so until there's some openings...
But when you go to a hospital, everybody takes that, right?
Yeah, it is. I have never heard of a hospital. I can't say that there isn't any that don't take Medicare, but there are doctors that have chosen not to work with Medicare at all. And if you go to see them and you're on Medicare, you can still see them, but you're going to pay cash.
But if you go to a hospital emergency room, something like that, and you can have an operation, you have a heart attack or something, they'll take that.
Yeah, they're good with work. I mean, hospitals are used to working with government programs, whether it's Medicare or Medicaid or whatever.
Well, let's go over what the percentages. There's an 80% and 20% thing. You know, the 80% Medicare covers 80% and supplement. Can you go through that?
Okay, so if you have basic Medicare, when you sign up with the government, you get a red, white, and blue card, and it says you have Medicare A and B. Medicare A covers hospital only, and they came out with that in the 60s because back then the only bills people were really worried about were hospital bills. I know my aunt had her gallbladder out in the early 60s, and she was in the hospital for 2 weeks just from a gallbladder surgery. Now it's outpatient. But initially they just came out with Medicare A for hospitalization, and then later more and more things were outpatient, so they added Medicare B, and that covers outpatient things like doctor's visits, MRIs, you know, x-rays, things like that. So those are all paid under B. So most people when they turn 65 sign up for A and B, but that covers roughly 80%. Now it just varies depending on the situation. You know, you might have a hospital deductible or a doctor visit deductible on things, but that's just kind of a nice round number to realize that Medicare covers approximately 80% of your bills. So you need to get a plan that's going to help you pay all the other bills that Medicare didn't cover. And also Medicare, the federal government requires everyone have a drug card, whether they want one or not. Got a lot of people that I run into say, well, I didn't take any prescriptions.
Is that the D?
That's Part D.
Okay.
And they say, I didn't get one. And I said, I'm sorry, but you're going to have a penalty now. The government, when the government catches up to you, they're going to penalize you for not getting a Medicare drug card, even though you didn't need one. The law says you have to have one.
That's cheaper, though, than the other ones, right?
They start at $7 a month. So, you know, if you're just going to get the drug card, at least you can avoid the penalty later.
I don't remember getting a bill for that thing. I wonder if I'm still...
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Drug cards, yeah, drug cards. This is the time of year when we change drug cards. So people want to see how much are all their prescriptions going to be on this drug card next year. I'd say most of my clients are just fine on a $7 drug card. If they're taking a really unusual drug, maybe something for a rare cancer, they might have a drug that's, you know, thousands of dollars a month, and then they might end up paying $40 or $50 for a drug card, but it's worth it if it's going to save them hundreds of dollars a month on their prescription.
I got to check out what I'm doing. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Was it still something an F and a G or something like that?
Yeah, you're talking about Medicare supplement, and the government calls them.
The reason why this person right here is the one who did my policy, so because I couldn't figure it out myself, and you know, there's no charge for this, right? You get paid by the Medicare people.
Right. I represent all the different styles of plans. I represent 40 different companies. So all I do is I sit down with a person and I find out, you know, what style do you like? First, we're going to pick the style of Medicare plan long before we talk about which company to use. So do you want a Medicare supplement or do you want a Medicare Advantage? And no matter what choice that person makes, I don't have to charge them anything, because whatever they choose, when I turn that application in, then that insurance company will pay me a fee for
Right. See, all this confusing stuff
Right.
you hear on TV, or Joe Namath comes on TV, all these people. I said, and I met you at the post office, I think, right?
Yes.
And I said, you had those cards on you. I said, hey, you do that stuff? And so you did it for me. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So I still don't know what I got, but I mean, I got something.
And everyone's different. So when we first sit down and look at that, what are we going to do about the 20% Medicare doesn't cover, and what are we going to do about your drug card? Then we say, well, there's two different ways to do it. Half of my clients say, I want a Medicare supplement. The government calls them Medigap plans, and this confuses people, but it's the same thing.
Okay, Medigap. Okay.
Yeah. So do you want Medigap and a drug card, or do you want to go over to the other side and get an Advantage plan? And they're complete opposites. This is why people get so confused when you start talking about them, because the person who chooses to go to the left-hand side and get a GAP plan and a drug card,
That's me.
they're paying a monthly fee. But
Right.
they're free to see any doctor in the country, any hospital, anybody that takes Medicare, and they love that freedom. They also don't have to worry about bills. You know, for most of the people who choose those plans, they get a G plan. Their deductible is $226 a year. That's it. They could have, you know, $5 million worth of medical bills, and they're only responsible for $226.
Okay, the only problem with the plan that I had, is because every year I would get a raise and a raise and a raise until it got to be a lot, and then you switched me to another place.
Yes. So you change companies.
But you can only do that if you didn't get sick or something?
Yes, exactly. So I tell people, you know, you might be perfectly happy with your plan, but if the rate's going higher and higher and you're healthy, you should move while you're healthy. Because when you get ready to move in the state of Tennessee, because there are state laws that kick in, there are states where you can change plans without answering health questions. But in Tennessee, if you wanted to move from your current plan over to another, even if it's the exact same plan, a G to a G, you'd have to answer the health questions to be able to make that change.
Are there different rates in the different states?
Very much, yeah.
Not for the Medicare, but for the other part?
Yes, for the supplemental, because the doctors charge more, you know. Like if you're in California, I've got a lot of clients in California, their rates are much higher on a Medigap plan than they would be if they're here.
Oh, but once you're on the Medigap plan, they got to keep you?
Yeah, they do. They can't cancel you.
So if I get some kind of sickness, then I'm stuck with the plan I got now, and I can stay with. But they're all the same, right? They all cover the same things, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, if you've got a G plan, it doesn't matter which company you buy it from. It's the same exact plan.
As long as they stay in business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, what you look for when you go saying, well, I want a G plan and there's 20 companies offering G plans, you don't necessarily want to go with the one that's showing the lowest price, because that company might be too small to handle the claims. And when something like COVID happens and a lot of claims come in, the smaller companies sometimes raise rates faster.
So you got to go with like Blue Cross or
look
with
for a
Mutual
company that's
Omaha
got
or something.
good rate stability.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the difference between Medicare Advantage and what they give you, and all these commercials and all these phone calls you get every day. I get like 100 phone calls every day from these people. And what are they, and I usually pretend I'm somebody else or something, I don't know. But what are they what are they actually offering you, and what's the disadvantage of Advantage?
All right. Well, before I answer that, I'm going to address the phone calls.
Okay.
Because it is against the law for anyone to call you and talk to you about a Medicare Advantage plan unless you ask them. So what they do is they call. Number one, some of them just lie and they say, I'm with Medicare.
That's right.
That's fraud. You need to
No,
get
they say
there.
I'm from the Medicare department.
You're right.
Of whatever they are.
But if they're trying to mislead you at all, and they are, you can report them to Medicare. Because
who in their right mind is going to buy a plan from somebody who just calls on the phone, and
exactly.
nobody's going to do that?
That's a good question.
So,
but people answer the TV commercials. So
yeah, right. Okay, they do the TV commercials. William Shatner's on them, and Joe Namath, and so tell me Tell me about Medicare Disadvantage or Advantage, whatever it's called.
One of the things that happens with the television commercials is that they use very misleading information. For instance, they might say, you know, call us and find out if you qualify for all these benefits. Well, a lot of the stuff that they're throwing out there as benefits are really only available to people with extremely low incomes. I have clients whose Social Security check is $500 a month. They qualify for those programs. Of all my clients, I I'd say, hundreds and hundreds of clients, I might have 5 that actually qualify for what they're advertising a lot of time on TV. And they know that. They're just trying to get you to call so they can sell you something else.
What are they trying to sell you?
Another Advantage plan. But there are certain Advantage plans that are designed for the very poor.
They give you dental coverage?
Yeah, most of them will give you dental coverage. But for instance, if you're a person of average means, your dental coverage might be capped out at $1,500 a year, $2,000 a year. But if you're a super low income person, you might get $5,000 worth of dental coverage. And you don't have to, when you're very low income, you don't have to pay co-pays at the doctor. You don't have to pay for your prescriptions. You don't have to pay your Medicare Part B. But your income is so low.
But you have to stay in the network.
Yeah, everybody has to stay in the network. But for the average client, an Advantage plan, it's not bad. I chose an Advantage plan when I went to Medicare myself. But they're not for everyone. That's the reason my clients go 50-50. So in general, just with everyone's different, but I'd say the more health issues a person's dealing with, the better off they are with a Medigap plan. For instance, somebody called me to come to their home one time, and they thought they wanted an Advantage plan. And when I got there, this person was in a wheelchair, and I found out they had to go to physical therapy 3 times a week for the rest of their life. Well, on an Advantage plan, that would be ridiculous, because that would be $35 each time. That's $400 a month just for physical therapy. And this person had a Medigap plan, and they were paying $150 a month for it, but all their physical therapy visits were free. Now, why would they want to go to an Advantage plan? It's going to destroy them.
So
right?
The sicker you are, the better off the Medigap, if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, if you're very poor, you got to go with the Advantage plan. So they'll give you more advantage. They'll give you more advantage.
My low-income clients typically are better off on Advantage plans because there's no monthly fee for them, and there's government programs that we can put them in that say, they'll cover the co-pays and things like that. So that's
very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's switch topics to regular health care.
Okay.
For people, younger people.
Yeah.
Now, what's the deal with that now? I have no idea. I haven't followed it anymore.
Yeah. That's
Obamacare is still the law. Or
very much in play, and a lot of people don't realize. I mean, I run into people all the time, and they think they can't afford health insurance. Like, yeah, you really can. I have a lot of clients on Obamacare plans. They call it the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
They don't pay anything at all for their health insurance.
They're on some kind of a sliding scale as income?
Yes, and it not only will adjust their premium, but it'll adjust their deductible. So we might look at Plan B on this, and one person, they might get the exact same plan, but one person might be paying $800 a month, and someone else might be paying $20 a month for the same plan. It just depends on what their income is.
It's income, it's not assets.
They don't look at assets at all.
Because I had a friend who had a lot of assets, like $5-10 million in assets, and had very little income.
Yeah.
And he was on, back when I was on that kind of plan, he was paying like nothing hardly, and I was paying like $1,400 a month or something, and he was paying like $100 a month, and he's way more money than I had.
It all depends on what your taxable income is. So a person could be sitting on tens of millions and drawing out $30,000 a year as pocket money, and they're going to end up with a plan basically at no cost.
That doesn't sound fair to me.
Sometimes it can be really frustrating, because I know people with just that kind of money, and I think, oh my gosh, they're getting a plan for nothing. And then I get on the other side of the spectrum. I had a young man who called me one time, and he had a family. He and his wife, between them, had 6 kids. Well, there was 8 people in this plan. His employer provided his insurance policy for nothing, but he had to pay to add the family members. Well, when you add those family members to the plan at his job, it was costing him, between the premium and the deductible, about $25,000 a year, and his family was living on $70,000 a year, but $25,000 was going just for the health plan at work and the deductible. And the way that the rules were set up was his family, if the employer did not allow the family to be on his plan, then his family would have been able to get a free plan under the Affordable Care Act. But because the way that the law was written said that it was only based on his cost for the plan, then he was forced to keep the family on the plan at work. And that's changing January 1 this year, finally. They're finally going to let people in that situation go to take their family members off of the plan at work if it's too expensive and put them onto the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
Which that's more fair. Because
when I was on the Affordable Care Act, I remember that I had a very high deductible and a very high premium, because the closer you got to, the older you got, the more it cost. And I was in my own business where it was ridiculous how much I was paying just for one person.
Absolutely. Yeah. I looked at it.
It didn't seem fair the way they were doing it, but I was the one who got the short end of the stick in that one.
And it's what's not fair is sometimes it's health conditions. You know, I was really fortunate that when I turned 60, I was in good health, and I looked at the Affordable Care Act, and it wasn't going to be affordable at all. If I chose an $8,700 deductible, I was going to be paying $1,000 a month for a plan that was pretty much unusable.
That was like what I was doing.
Yeah. So
I had a choice.
If you're in good enough health, and pretty much you got to be in perfect health, but there are plans off market. And so I was able to go off market and get a plan for $200 a month that had a $12,000 deductible and didn't give me anything, didn't give me my wellness exams or anything. But I thought, you know, if I'm saving $10,000 a year in premium, I can afford to pay for my own blood test, right?
Right.
But in order to do that, a person has to be in good enough health to answer the questions. You don't want to get turned down, and also you can't have any pre-existing conditions. So when people try to do that,
pre-existing conditions. What is high cholesterol a pre-existing condition?
Anything that you've been treated for in the last 2 years under the law is a pre-existing condition. So if you'd had certain medications for heart problems and you had a plan with a no pre-existing condition clause, with a pre-existing condition clause, then
but what if I just went to the doctor, my cholesterol was elevated, I didn't take pills or anything like that?
If he wanted to prescribe pills and you didn't take them, it's still pre-existing. Now, if you go to the doctor and he says, you're good, your cholesterol might be a little high, but I wouldn't consider it as being anything, well, then it's really not pre-existing. There's a lot of gray area there, and each company
Everybody has something wrong with them.
Well, pretty much. So I had somebody one time that had a kidney stone a few years ago, and when I asked her about it, I'm in perfect health, I've never had anything, so we put her on a plan that didn't cover pre-existing conditions because it was super cheap, and sure enough, she got a kidney stone. And she went to the hospital for that, and they didn't pay the bill because they said, well, you've had them before, it was pre-existing. So you have to be really careful. People buy plans all the time, and then they don't find out how bad they are until they have claims.
Well, getting back to the Medicare, is there anything that won't be covered for me? I mean, if
the federal government says it's covered, it's covered. So, you know.
What's not covered? If I have a Medigap plan, and I have the drug thing with the Part D, and I have the regular Medicare, what do I have to watch out for?
Usually not much. You know, you're not going to get a facelift. You know, you're not going to get
facelifts
anything.
aren't covered.
They're not covered. Huh? Sorry. So
we're talking about that. I get fat. Okay.
And the federal government sets up their rules all the time, and they say we're covering this and that. So, for instance, they weren't covering shingles shots until now, but starting next year, the federal government has added shingles shots, vaccines, to their list, and so starting next year, those
But
are
is there anything that's not on there at all? I mean, that you can think of?
Not that you'd worry about. You know, people get health insurance to cover things like cancer and heart problems, and they're all covered. So there's not much that's.
But what if you get one of those things where you have you need a drug that's like $50,000 a pill? You know, the ones where you need an operation that costs a real lot of money.
It'll still be covered on most plans, and even Medicare Advantage plans have to cover everything. If the federal government says that it's covered, it has to be covered even on an Advantage plan. They can't say, yeah, well, you know, that would be covered on a supplement but not on Advantage. That doesn't happen. The only thing that's going to be different isn't what's covered, it's how much you're going to pay for it. So if a person has a Medigap plan and they need a $1 million surgery, they're going to be out of pocket. With an F plan, they have no deductible. With a G plan, they have a $226 a year deductible. That's all they're going to pay. Now, the person on an Advantage plan needs that $1 million surgery. They might have $35 every time they see the specialist and $300 a day in the hospital.
On that deductible thing with the drugs, is it deductible right off the top? You have to pay the first $236, whatever you said?
Yeah, that's on the
or does it go a little at a time?
$226 is on the Medigap plan, not on the drug plan. The drug plan has its own deductible, which next year Medicare has set at $505, but it only applies to brand name drugs.
Well, just two drug plans?
Well, there's a drug plan and there's a medical plan. So that's why a person who has your style has 3 cards in their wallet. They have their red, white, and blue Medicare card.
Yes, but
they have a supplement card. They have a drug card.
And there's a deductible for the medicine on the supplement card.
Medicine doesn't go on a supplement.
No,
it goes on the drug card.
It's a deductible for the drug card.
Yes.
What other deductible would there be?
The drug plans. There are some cards that don't have a deductible, but generally you pay for those more for those cards. But if you get generic drugs, there's never I can't think of any drug plans that have a deductible for generic drugs.
Right.
Just brand name drugs.
It seems like when every time I get drugs for some reason, I get a deduction on it for some reason. And not, I mean, it's just a cheaper price, but it's not totally, I pay something for it. Anyway, this is why this is very confusing. The whole healthcare thing is confusing because it changes all the time.
It does change
and
all
you got
the time.
all these crazy rules that people don't know about. That's why you got to need a guy. A guy comes to see somebody like you, and you solve all their problems for them.
It's so complicated. People will ask me, well, if I do this, what will happen? Well, if you go through the links and check,
Right.
every scenario down to the last little thing is different.
Right.
And people.
That's why I was happy when I met you that time. I said, "Hey, I don't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
You just do the whole thing for me, like that." I said, "Hey, this is great." And just, I think I sent some people to you too because they were confused too. They called me and I said, "What did you do?" I said, "I'm not exactly sure what I did, but I got it taken care of."
Yeah. And I appreciate that's the only way I stay in business. I don't make cold calls. I never call anyone. They have to call me if they want me, But it's a lot of fun. And what I love about my job is it's so different. It's like finding the exact right fit for each person. I walk into households all the time, and the husband might choose one kind of plan, and the wife chooses something completely different.
I have some news for you right now.
Yeah?
We just ran out of time.
Oh.
Anyway, well, it's good. My guest has been Jessey. She's right there on the screen. And she's what do you call yourself? A healthcare consultant?
A health plan consultant.
Health plan consultant, right. And she's great. That's all I can tell you. My name's Jessey Goldberg. We'll see you next week on another edition of the show.